What's going on? Jake here with Uncommon EDC, and this is the Nextool Gemini. They're 13-in-1 electric multi-tool, the electric portion being obviously that power screwdriver or power bit driver on the end there. And this I picked up through their Kickstarter at the early bird pricing of $55. I believe it's going to MSRP at $79, and they're not available quite yet because they're still fulfilling all the Kickstarter orders, but I would imagine once that's done that you should see them popping up soon after that. Nextool is a brand that mainly I know from Amazon. They make budget multi-tools and they make some pretty cool ones. I don't have any of them, but I have seen they make some single-sided multi-tools as well as some with both pliers and full-size scissors on there. And so they're pretty creative, and when I saw this is definitely the type of thing that I like to check out on the channel because it's innovative, different, and just a little bit unique. And so these are the type of things I really enjoy checking out. So I jumped on that pre-order pretty quickly and then waited a couple months for it to actually arrive. But really cool. I'm going to start with kind of the size comparison. The Victorinox Spirit, I called this the Spirit X the other day. This is actually the Swiss Tool MXBS. So you can see they have a very similar size profile. The exception being just how thick it is, so the Nextool is significantly thicker. The Swiss Tool is actually a little bit heavier. I don't remember the exact weight of it. It's in the 10-ounce range, I believe, whereas the Nextool is at 8.64 ounces. So even though it's a little bit larger, it's not as weighty, and that's because there's just not as many tools. A lot of the space was taken up by this power screwdriver, and so not as much steel in there weighing it down. But I'll start off by talking about the bit driver / power screwdriver section because that's probably the part that's going to be the most interesting to people. USB-C rechargeable, so that's super nice because you don't need a proprietary plug. You can just use any USB-C plug and that works well. 230 milliamp hour lithium battery in here, which doesn't sound huge, but they say it can drive or remove 500 screws. And so should be sufficient for what it's using it for. If you were to see that in like a battery backup, that type of thing, 230 milliamp hours isn't huge, but for its purposes, it's definitely sufficient. You can see the switch for operating it. There's no kind of back and forth that you have to set to clockwise or counterclockwise. If you want clockwise, you just hit the up arrow, and if you want counterclockwise, you just hit the down. And so that's really nice, really easy to actuate, and maybe a little bit too easy. If this were maybe more recessed and not so easy to press, it might be a little bit better. It's not a huge issue, but when you are pulling these tools out from the other side, you go in to access them, it's really easy to accidentally push that button while you're doing so. And so not the biggest deal, it just makes a little bit of noise, especially if you don't even have a bit in there. It's just going to make a little bit of noise. It doesn't matter that you're pushing the button, but I think they probably could have recessed this just a little bit and maybe put like a silicone on the button and made it a little bit harder to actuate and you wouldn't have that issue. But again, it's a really, really minor issue in the grand scheme of things. Now, as far as the torque goes on this, they say it has a 0.2 Nm electric torque and a 3.0 Nm mechanical torque, and so I have no idea what those numbers mean. If they mean something to you, great. What I can say is it's decent but not too strong, and so I've been using it, which probably isn't really the intended use case. I've been testing it out on different knives, and so what that means for something like this, which I recently disassembled and did not Loctite because I plan on changing them again, is that there's no problem. You can loosen that right out. That's all the way out and back in. And it's not so powerful that it's gonna damage the G10 or the micarta underneath, strip the screws, anything like that, and it removes it with no problem. What that means for something like this, which may have been Loctited in, is that when you, actually that worked fine. Let's try the other one. That's also fine. Let's try body screw. Okay, there we go. So this one is going to be Loctited in. You see it just kind of struggles to turn it. And so pretty easy to get past that. Just turn it manually. And then once you do that, you can see it has no problem removing it and screwing it back in. And so if it were a little bit stronger, you might not run into that problem, but I also don't mind it because, like I said, I don't want to damage the handles or strip out the screws, and so it's a little bit preferable that it's not so strong. And most of the things that you're going to be using this for, like if you're removing the battery panel on a remote control car, you don't need it to be that strong. They're not Loctited in. It's going to do the job just fine. It's not going to be working on a construction site replacing any of your normal tools, but it's also powerful enough for most of what you're going to actually use this for. So really like that about it. And that seems to work well. We'll see how it holds up over time, just kind of the machinery in here. It does come in a silicone case, so hopefully you're not banging it around too much. The case is nice, but I would have preferred something that was belt mountable, but I'll probably be able to figure something out with just any of the other cases for other multi-tools I have. I'm sure it'll fit into, but it is in the silicone case. You do get a selection of the bits. These are the same bits as the Wiha micro bits, and so I tested out with the ones that came with that NAFS bit driver, and they're interchangeable, both work on the other. And so I will link to some additional bits that you can pick up on Amazon if you're not super thrilled with the selection. And the selection isn't bad. It has 3 different Phillips. I think it's the PH1, PH00, PH000, and then you have a T8, a T6, which I have installed now, a T5, and then the Star, I forget which Star one it is, Star 0.8, and then you have an H2.0, H1.5, and then a flathead, which is SL 2.0. And so a decent selection of bits, and you can, like I said, use the Wiha micro bits if you want to replace them. It does come in this nice kind of soft rubber sleeve that holds everything in place and can attach to a keychain, lanyard, something like that if you want. I'm not sure how the retention is. It feels pretty decent, but if it's banging around in your pocket, not sure if these will eventually fall out, or if the rubber is thick enough that it's going to hold up to a lot of abuse with these moving around where it gets super loose or even breaks. So we'll see how that goes. Also comes with that USB-C cord for charging it, although you can use any USB-C. And so let's get to the actual tools on here. So they're all on the opposite side of that power driver, and the first tool on the top is going to be your knife. And again, when you're pulling these out, it's pretty easy to press that button just because of where your hand lands, but again, it's not really that big an issue. Now there is a liner lock on this. You do need 2 hands to deploy it just because of where that kind of thumb opening is. You really can't get your thumb too well in there in a one-handed opening fashion, especially since it's kind of upside down. So you are going to need 2-hand opening, but 2.4 inch cutting edge on this blade. Nice little blade. I don't really need a blade on a knife, but it is a pretty soft steel, 420J2. All of the tools are. That's going to be pretty easy to sharpen, but not really going to hold an edge, and it comes with kind of a butter knife edge. It's not sharp whatsoever, which is fine. Not really buying multi-tools for their knives, but always nice to see a nicer knife on there. This one is a little bit lackluster, but will do the job. Now next to that we have a can opener, bottle opener / box cutter. So they're listing this as 3 tools, which is definitely generous, but will work for all 3 of those tasks. I just hit the button on accident. It will work for all 3 of those tasks. Next to that, we have a flathead screwdriver, which seems a little bit redundant since it does take bits, but it will also work as a pry bar, so don't have a problem with that. One thing I will mention is most of the bits are going to be pretty small because it is that micro bit. I don't know if there's an adapter that would allow you to use 1/4 inch bits. That would be nice. I'm going to look it up probably after the video. If I do find a good one, I might link it in the description as well. But as is, it only takes those micro bits, which is limiting a little bit in size because they're smaller bits. Now it also has this Phillips screwdriver. It's one of those flattened versions. This seems super redundant. It doesn't serve any other function and seems pretty similar in size to the largest Phillips bit, the PH1. And so it might be slightly larger, but it really does feel pretty redundant and just seems like they could have used that tool slot for something else, but that's all right. Now, the last tool is a pair of scissors, which I'm really happy to see here because I always love scissors in my multi-tool. And I tested these out. They work really well, pretty smooth. It does rub a little bit on the other side, which I'm assuming eventually it will rub to the point where it doesn't feel the rub, but you do feel a little bit of a click and see it hits right before that closes, but it's really not difficult to power through. Pretty comfortable to use with that kind of rolled steel here for your thumb. And all of those tools are going to be that 420J2. Now that's everything on the outside. And you can see the scales, they're pretty stylized. They look like kind of like what you'd expect to see on a graphics card, which is funny, but they're not too bad. It's a little bit thick, like I said, but really that's because they're shoving a lot into here. So I don't know that there's much they can do, but I think it looks pretty decent in that closed orientation. And when you open it up, there's no tools inside except for the 4 tools they count here in the pliers, which they're saying needle nose pliers, regular pliers, and then a hard wire cutter and a wire cutter. That wire cutter is replaceable, which is a nice thing to see, and the pliers do meet up nicely. They're a little bit thinner than a similar size multi-tool. So for example, on the Swiss tool, if I get this open, you'll see they're a little bit more robust on here, but similar in size. So just the tip's a little bit more robust. Overall, it feels a little bit more robust, but pretty similar in size. They also open up a little bit further than the Swiss tool, which is a nice thing. So that is nice. It is spring loaded, so when you set it down, they're gonna pop open, knock anything off the shelf that you set them on. But it's not a super strong spring, but it is nice. I like spring loaded sometimes. I don't lean too far either way. I don't mind non-spring loaded, I don't mind spring loaded, and these ones feel pretty good. No play whatsoever on those pliers, so they're in there nice and smooth, and overall feel pretty good. The handles are nice to use. They're a little bit more comfortable than some of the other multi-tools, and it's really smooth. So like with Leathermans, not so much with the Victorinox, but with Leathermans especially, I feel like there's a break-in period for the pliers where it's a little bit hard to actually open and close them. More close than open, it just doesn't really want to close. But this is super smooth and snappy and satisfying to use, and so overall really cool. Now thoughts on the tool itself, I think it's pretty cool. I definitely could have swapped out a few of these tools. I don't really mind the tool set so much. I was really buying it for that electric bit driver, which is definitely a little bit of a gimmick, but at the same time it's a gimmick that works, and so that's not necessarily a bad thing. I like innovation. I like when companies try out different things, and Nextool seems like a company that's not afraid to try out different things, and so I like that about them. There's definitely a few things that I would change, and hopefully one day they'll do a version 2, but I don't think it's so bad. I think it's a pretty good first shot at it. I wouldn't mind seeing a little bit more torque, but you really don't want it to be too powerful either. It doesn't feel too bad with how it came out of the box, and it charged pretty quick. I didn't notice there's a light indicator here. I didn't actually time it, but it felt like it probably came with a half charge, and I charged a full charge in under an hour, and so the light goes from just red to green when it's done charging. I didn't notice exactly when it switched, but I'll try and keep better track of that in the future. But let me know what you think of this down in the comments below. Is it too gimmicky, or is it something you'd be interested in picking up when it does fully launch on Amazon? And like I said, I'll try and get the link updated once it does launch on Amazon, but in the interim I'll post a link to the Nextool web store on Amazon. But pretty cool multi-tool overall. Excited to finally have it in my hands. It hasn't been that long. I think I did it in maybe January, the beginning of January or so. So whenever it launched, I was pretty early on, like the second or third day, and so hasn't been too long of a wait, but it did feel like a long time because I've been excited to check this out for a while. But again, let me know what you think in the comments below. As always, be sure to like, comment, subscribe, and hit the notification button. And I hope you have a great one. Take care.